Hello everyone, Ryan from the MTG Homebrew Network here to talk about a deck, well, kind of a deck, that I've been working on for the past better half of 2 years. This is a project I've been meaning to make a video on for a long time, and just really haven't had the, I had to relaunch things to really want to make this video happen, and I am in a place now where I want to do that. So I am humbly presenting to you Goblin the Gathering. Now, you can tell from the card that's above me right now, that's the namesake of the deck, Goblin Gathering. It reads 2 and a red for a sorcery. Create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to 2 plus the number of cards named Goblin Gathering in your graveyard. 2 is a party, 3 is a felony. Now, the original concept for this deck is sort of parallel to the Dandân deck, if you're familiar with that. So I'm going to be talking about this deck in context of that. If you don't know what that is, I recommend looking up some videos about that, see what the play style and the construction of that deck is like. There are some articles. I'd be surprised if, as a Magic player, you're watching this video and you haven't heard about Dandân. But in that event, definitely go look it up. It's awesome. And I wanted to innovate on the idea in a new setting. So, one day, I was at my LGS waiting for a cube to fire, and we had 4 of us just hanging out. And we didn't want to start a game of Commander because that might, that would likely take too long because people are on their way. And I said, well, how about you and me, the person sitting across from me, play a game of Dandân while we're waiting? And the 2 people sitting next to us were like, well, we also want to play, so do you have another deck? And I said, well, no, I only have the 1. So we tried a game of 4-player Dandân, and as you might imagine, it didn't really work out. It was really interesting, but it definitely had its limitations because it's not suited for 4 people. So what I've done here is I've made a shared deck format game that is recommended for 3 to 4 players based on Goblin Gathering. I was looking through Bulk because I had bought a collection from someone recently, and I found this card very innocuous, and I thought of putting it in like some kind of not popper kitchen table-y goblin deck with like gutter snipes and stuff. So it had been on my mind for a while, but then when I thought about it a little bit more, I'm gonna go to another card right now. Rite of Flame has almost the exact same rules text as Goblin Gathering, where you make 2 and then add 1 for each in your graveyard. Now, thinking about how Dandân works, you share a graveyard with your opponents, and if you have a Goblin Gathering in your graveyard, you'll make 3 goblins, and if you have more, you'll make more. So what originally started from a deck that was really suited towards 2 people, suddenly I had this deck that got incrementally more powerful as the game progressed. But real quick, I'm going to talk about the specific rules to this game that are unique to this and that are not a part of Dandân. So firstly and mainly, it's not really a game rule, but the deck is 100 cards. This is to compensate for the amount of players, as when you have 3 people or 4 people starting, you're removing 28 cards from the deck, and that leaves 72 left in the deck to draw from. And also, very importantly, if you are looking on the screen, we also have some wheels. So every time that a player casts that card, a big chunk of the deck is removed, twice as much as if there's only 2 players. So with that in mind, there's 100 cards instead of 80. Secondly, there is a Laboratory Maniac rule, where if you would draw a card and there's no cards in the deck, instead you make a 1/1 goblin and take a damage. And this might sound innocuous, but the last rule is that each player only starts with 5 life. So when you're in, I'm going to call it the bonus round of there being no cards in the deck, you're kind of on a clock, and you need to make your decisions very, very carefully, because when you're making a goblin and taking a damage, it can block, but it can also attack, and you should probably figure out what's best for you to help you win that game. I've only ever really run into the lab man rule a couple times. Usually the game ends before there's no cards in the deck, or something else happens, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So specifically speaking, in the context of Dandân, I wanted to have some similarities that people could kind of be like, oh, that's the this version of that. And there's also some differences that I wanted to really, really harp on. So firstly, in the way that the Dandân deck has memory lapse, this deck has Tybalt's Trickery. It reads 1 and a red, instant, counter target spell, choose 1, 2, or 3 at random, so usually just roll a dice. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of the library until they reveal a non-land card with a different name than that spell. Or they exile the spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. So firstly, I wanted a counterspell. There are other red counterspells, but this one is just counterspell, then the rest of the effect. The choosing 1, 2, or 3 at random and then milling that many cards kind of complements the growth of the graveyard thing, where sometimes it'll mill over a Goblin Gathering, sometimes it'll mill over a Recoup. Recoup being target sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to the mana cost, and it has flashback. So if we're milling cards, and also the opponent still gets to cast something, they're not just out a card. I like the aspect of Dandân where you get to manipulate the top card of the deck, but I didn't want to just straight up copy that. I understand that that's like an appeal of that format, but I think there is more to the idea of sharing a graveyard and a deck that could have been played on, so I really focused on the graveyard being the thing as a resource that everyone is using, and being very conscious of what you put in there. So if you're milling randomly, you don't really have a choice, but if you mill over like a Goblin Gathering and a Rite of Flame, it's going to be better for your opponent when it resolves. But it can also be good for you if you have access to those cards. Next, I really wanted to talk about the shared graveyard. I know I just mentioned it with the Tybalt's Trickery and the Recoup, but the fact that you have options to you when there is a graveyard is really, really important to what I think would make this deck really fun to play. Specifically, we have 2 Throes of Chaos that will just hang out when they get there, and you can always have something to do when you have a land in your hand. Yes, it's random, but it's the less than 4 thing that we're, hoping to play into. And very specifically, because there is a shared graveyard, I really wanted to include some way to mitigate the graveyard not just becoming full. Because, as you can imagine, people will be milling this deck really aggressively to try to make their spells better. So if there was a way to play around that without exiling the cards from the graveyard, I wanted some kind of like shuffle effect or something like that. Which leads me to one of the creatures in the deck. There's only 3, and this is one of them. It's Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. It reads 10 mana for a legendary creature Eldrazi. When you cast this spell, draw 4 cards, Annihilator 4, and when Butcher of Truth is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library. Since we share a graveyard, everything just goes back in. It's not unlikely that if you cast a wheel, this will go to the graveyard at some point. You can also do it at instant speed with Thrill of Possibility. This invites a little bit of counterplay where your opponent might cast a Goblin Gathering knowing that there's 10 in the graveyard, but then suddenly there's only 2. Important also about Kozilek, this has happened multiple times. Tybalt's Trickery can cast it from the top of the deck if you hit it. and you cast it, so you still draw the 4 cards. So Tybalt's Trickery just has an implied amount of risk to it, no matter what's, whatever it's going to hit. There are definitely worse things to hit, like like Rite of Flame, because if it's, we're in the middle of combat or whatever, that mana's just going to go away. So there are duds, but there's definitely a big hit if you just so happen to get there. And because we have this shared graveyard, I just wanted there to be something to do no matter what. Most of your draws, I really haven't seen many people get stuck in the game, and I feel like in Dandân, sometimes you will get stuck where you just like draw a card, don't do anything, pass. And like if that's the end of the game, that's the end of the game. But Goblin the Gathering games are quick. They're not like super long, grindy tempo time. They're like, if you have 20 minutes to play a 4-player game, this is like right on the money with where we're trying to go. Now, specifically talking about the differences to Dandân, the incremental power is really something I wanted to like push, Dandân is always a 4/1 for 2 mana. That's it. That's the rate. And while that's great, it doesn't get better as the game progresses. Goblin Gathering and Rite of Flame both do. They have this incremental power scale that happens as the game progresses. Yes, the graveyard can go away, but it has to be arranged in such a way that it does. Your Goblin Gathering that you cast on your turn is always going to be better than the opponent's that they cast on their turn, as long as nothing happens to the graveyard. So when you get to that point of like, okay, you just cast 1, you get 3, now this person just cast 1, they get 4, it's still only 1 more goblin, but it does encourage that kind of like, I have a bunch of goblins, I can attack cleanly into some players and make decisions based on that. But it's also not great all the time to attack because you have 3 other players that can attack on your turn. And specifically, I added 2 ways of giving haste to your goblins. I made this very, very, very intentional as to what cards I included, specifically Crashing Drawbridge and Surge of Zeal. Both of these cards get blown out by Pyrokinesis, and Crashing Drawbridge also dies to Slight Malfunction and Chain Reaction. Crashing Drawbridge reads 2 mana, Artifact Creature Wall, Defender, 0/4, and you can tap it to give your creatures haste. That means it has to stick around for a turn before it does anything, but it does block a goblin very well. It doesn't block it super for free forever, because if you block with a goblin and then your opponent follows with a Sweltering Suns, that can kill it. But Crashing Drawbridge is just, I think, right where the haste enabler needs to be. As well, Surge of Zeal, target creature and each other creature that shares a color with it gain haste until end of turn. For 1 red mana, this is really, really, really solid, but like I said, it can get blown out by Pyrokinesis if you just target the 1 goblin and then blow up 3 other ones. There are no other ways to deal instant speed damage besides, I guess, Balduvian Trading Post, but you kind of have to be in a situation where your opponents are already attacking you. So the Surge of Zeal being a 2 of just push through, I think is a great risk-reward mana to spend on having hasty goblins, and sometimes it just ends the game. I think that was part of why I included it. I just wanted that push, that 1 card that's like, okay, 1 mana, win the game, if you're in such a position. Following that, another difference to Dandân is that this is intended for 3 to 4 players. I know I said that a bunch already, but thinking about it, there isn't really a format for 3 players. I've tested this a bunch with 3, and it has felt exactly the same as 4. The only difference was there's more cards left in the deck every time there's a wheel, but, you know, it's not a main factor. 2 players ganging up on 1 player is very rare because everyone has that incremental, like, my turn is going to be better than your turn, so why would I help the person next to me kill the person across from me? And I feel like this fills that, like, if you have 3 people and you don't know what to do, a game of Commander doesn't feel great because a lot of cards have to scale to having 4 players in the game, like, you know, Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, stuff like that. You need the 4th player to make your cards as fully powerful as possible, whereas the deck is always going to be however many Goblin Gatherings are cast before it. I have a point on my notes that's just Goblin politics. Considering that there are 4 players instead of 2, it does lead to the opportunity for people to encourage politics in this kind of game, and I would like to encourage that. The people I've been testing with aren't the most politicky, but I think that in the same way that CEDH has a lot of table talk, the Goblin talk definitely lends itself to maybe some, like, collusion deals being made, but at the same time there's a level of, like, chaos that casting a Tybalt's Trickery or something, you know, you can't promise much when you don't know what's going to happen. So when you have those politics, you have to take everything with a grain of salt that, like, something else could happen entirely and just change the entire board. That being said, I think that adds to a layer of the fun, where if you have that kind of interaction with the people you're playing with, as long as it's all in good faith, it could make for a deeper game experience, and I really like the idea of that. Dandân is just 1-to-1 competitive, whereas you can kind of talk your way into situations that are beneficial to you using goblins, and I think that's really funny. So speaking on behalf of this deck, you know, I'm sitting here trying to convince you that this is worth building and playing, and I truly believe that it is, for a couple reasons. So if you look down in right here in the corner, the price tag is $350 and whatever. This is, if you consider that most Commander decks are, you know, built with some budget in mind, this outshines all of those because this is one deck for 4 people. Only one person has to build this, or you could build it with your friends and, you know, put money towards this just to put it together. I understand that a lot of the Dandân cards are not expensive. That deck is relatively inexpensive. And that there are some cards in here that could be replaced with other cards. Specifically, Kozilek is, you know, $50-ish, and Tybalt's Trickeries are somewhere near like 10 to 15. I think that if you are going to build a more budget version of this, you definitely can. There are other options, but just the experience that I've had with this, it's well worth the investment. It makes the gameplay very, very deep and good. And if you think about it, you only need to build this deck for 4 people. One person can, you know, put all that together, or you can build it with your friends. It's not an incredibly expensive experience to build. Secondly, on behalf of this deck, there's always, every single game I've played has had this complex stack and board state dynamic that is really fulfilling. You're not really gonna see a ton of times where one player is just super pulling ahead, or one player is really, really just far behind. It's very much constructed in a way that no one will ever really be out of the running. And if that does happen, then the game isn't too long anyways, and hopefully they'll have a better game next game. And also, if this is your, cup of tea, there's just embedded chaos in this deck that you can't really, plan for, specifically with Tybalt's Trickery and, the Throes of Chaos. And also, Reforge the Soul, Wheel of Misfortune. You just kind of have this always looming over you kind of chaos that you're just always going to have to be at peace with. Because whatever happens is going to happen, and you just gotta rock with it and play around it. And I think that's really fun. It's been such a worthwhile and fun experience building this deck, and I'm really, really happy to finally share it with you all. And of course, if the price point is, not achievable per se, I always recommend just proxying. You're not bringing this to a tournament, it's just for fun. Print it out, make some nice proxies, do whatever you want. I have this built because I wanted to do that. I like the way it looks when it's put together. All of my basic mountains match. All of my printings are similar. It's just a very nice looking deck, and I'm very, very happy showing it to people. But you certainly don't need to invest all the money into it to experience it. It was a little tough getting 8 Tybalt's Trickeries from my sources that I buy from my LGSs. And of course, sourcing 13 Goblin Gatherings can maybe be tough unless you do have a backlog of, Ravnica bulk. And even then, there might not be 14. But a lot of these cards people have, There's usually, someone opened some Double Masters, and there's always some freak who has, a ton of alliances. That's me. And this is, Wheel of Misfortune is such a commander card, you're definitely going to run into that stuff. But yeah, if you don't have the means to build it, just print it out, give it a shot, just play with your friends, I think this is a really, really, really cool thing, and I definitely recommend trying it out, at least if you're not interested in just investing in such a micro format. Me personally, I love a micro format. Give me your tiny leaders, give me your Dandans. I like the weird stuff. So hopefully this is weird enough for you, and it's just cool enough that you'll be like, yeah, let me cast some Goblin Gatherings and make some 1/1s. I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't plug myself and say that I do have some custom Goblin art tokens in my Etsy shop. I'll put one up right now. They are drawn by my friend Max, and I'm very, very happy with how they look and how they came out, so I definitely recommend picking some up if you're going to be casting some goblins. This deck is so cool. I'm so proud of this. I definitely think if you've listened for this long, then you are likely interested to see more from this deck, and I'm gonna record some gameplay of it next time I get some people in the office. I'm so excited to just jam games of this all the time. It's one of those things where if you have 3 or 4 people and you don't want to commit to a game of Commander, this is the perfect little board game that is in the same rules as Magic, but it's a mini game, kind of like a Mario Party thing. Yeah. Goblin the Gathering. I think this deck is sick. Definitely build it if you have the means to. If you don't, proxy it, put it together, play with your friends. Give it a shot. It's worth it. Yeah. Ryan from MTG Homebrew Network, thank you for watching. There will be some other content coming out soon, so keep an eye out for it. Thank you.